Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan. And we do have some laughing in the background because we're amusing ourselves because we watched what isn't a funny film, but a serious film.
A fantastic film.
A really, really cool film. And so who is with us tonight? I think we got the boys back in town.
The boys are back in town, one might say. One might write a song about that. I'm Aaron, welcome listener. I'm your dive gear expert.
Next up is Blake, your cat expert. Did you know there's more than one kind of cat? There's Tabby, there's Sphinx, there's Calico, there's Garfield, there's Heathcliff, there's
you forgot
Cringer.
Siamese.
That's racist.
Wait, what, Egyptian?
Brian.
Hey, everybody, this is Brian. I'm your nurse with an axe expert.
Oh, like that hasn't happened before. And so we watched this
Who are you?
foreign film called Apocalipsis.
Dan, you should say your name is Dan.
I said my name is Dan as we...
Did you say that your name was Dan?
I think so.
Okay, well, listener, that's Dan.
Anyway. So we watched this foreign film that was released on Netflix recently called Apocalypsis Z, The Beginning of the End. I'm not going to try to say it in Spanish, even though it is El
Principio de Fin.
Okay. Came out pretty recently. It was directed by Carlos Torrens, and the screenplay was by Angel Agudo, and it's based on a novel by Manuel Loreleo, something like that.
Oh, I'm just noticing the author's first name is the same as our protagonist's
Correct.
first name. Manuel is our protagonist.
Francisco Ortiz is the guy who plays Manuel, who is a lawyer and owns a small business. He happens to know a little bit about electrical engineering and stuff. We have been kind of pushing off doing an episode for a little while, and Brian suggested this, a wonderful, wonderful zombie film. And it really doesn't have that much to do with zombies as it does to do with really good storytelling. And because of that, we picked beers out of the fridge.
Well, you picked
don't
beers because you're a wonderful host who takes care of our drinking needs.
And had beer for us.
Yes, about a week ago, I was down at Beer Mongers, and I got a bunch of beer from them, including a Boneyard West Coast IPA and a ColdFire Black IPA, which we will talk about in a little bit. Both of these beers, top notch. I was just hoping they would go good with a zombie action film, but this really wasn't as action as I thought it was going to be.
But there was a nice amount of action.
Well,
I would argue.
I would say, so for our listener, we can kind of, we've given a bit of a review. I don't want to do any spoilers because this is a new movie.
Yeah. I agree.
And
Fresh movie.
I also don't want to do spoilers because I highly encourage our listeners to see.
It's also a fresh take on some of the plot points.
Yes.
Yeah.
So without too many spoilers, I do think there's a number of interesting questions about how this is different than what an American take on the zombie genre has been. And would be like if you had this.
Hard agree.
If you had this protagonist and he was an American, you could follow most of the same story arc, but it would be a very different movie, I think, and probably a lesser movie. I really enjoyed this, and I think I really enjoyed it for some of the freshness that a different cultural tradition brought to the zombie genre.
Yeah. It did a lot of the usual tropes of protagonists watching news coverage of the outbreak that everyone's saying. They even reference COVID-19. They're saying, "Oh man, we have to be careful. Like it's COVID-19.
Yeah,
we don't know what this is. If it's airborne." Sprinkling breadcrumbs, little hints of what's to come.
But also social media as part of the information exchange and how our protagonist learns what's going on.
He uses his phone a lot. He's looking at not Tinder.
Well, he's trying to reach out. It looks like TikTok, but he's trying to reach out to his sister.
Yeah.
And leaving messages in a very, I think, humanizing, sweet way to make him, make us relate to him by saying that none of the messages go through because no one's manning all the.
So the film is set up with he and his wife are leaving a city after spending some time with his sister, their kid, and
nephew,
and the nephew.
Yeah,
and he gets along really well with it. And there's
him. It's a him with a nephew.
He gets along with him really well, and there's a lot of issue as they're driving back in discussing, do you want kids or not?
There's some relationship drama.
So there's a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of issues, and something happens. They're in an accident. That's not really spoiling it because it says most of it.
I think we should spoil this because it's a point of difference with this movie and other zombie films.
It's about his grieving process,
right?
Yeah.
It just happens to take place.
His wife dies.
Yeah. Right.
It's a big spoiler, but it's only 5 minutes in.
It's 5 minutes into the movie. Yeah. And there's a grieving process that we see him going through. Go ahead, Brian.
And he's in the middle of this process, and then there's a zombie outbreak. And it's really the story of this one person, and is he going to get busy living, or is he going to get busy dying?
Nice. Yeah. Excellent quote.
Which is a quote from Shawshank.
I feel like if an American film did this, she'd still be alive, and he'd try to win her back, which is actually British because that happens in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
But that would be a very American thing to go, I got to get Lindsay back. I got to go save her.
Yeah,
you just described Shaun of the Dead. That different take on, like, there was a breakup, and he's trying to win back his former
girlfriend.
God, what a phenomenal film.
Yeah.
This is also really good.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of foreshadowing and a lot of let's look at that grieving process and where you are in it with the people that he interacts with as he discovers, hey, it's been a week. I'm running out of food. I need to go look for more food, because he didn't really have a chance to stock up because it happened really, really fast.
Yeah, because I feel he's been bunkered up for the year since his wife passed until the zombie outbreak. So he doesn't really prepare the way some other people who have been watching the news have.
Yeah, he's been dealing with his internal landscape so much that he's a little out of touch.
Well, I mean, the news is on every time he's in his apartment at the beginning, and he ignores it.
Yeah.
He just straight up, it's just background noise to him. He's more concerned about making sure the cat's fed, and, he owes, in his mind, a lot to the cat because that reminds him of his wife, because it was his wife's cat.
Right.
And that's why you're like, why the hell are you taking this cat everywhere? Well, because it was her cat. And he wants to take care of it because he couldn't save her.
It's a talisman. It's a talisman of that relationship that he had.
When you lose a loved one, you want to keep whatever you can that reminds you of them, as meowy as they are.
Yeah.
Being in a crate in a bag.
I hear the cat,
Let's comment, though. I mean, the way the cat is represented in this film is like, it's really well done, because the cat makes cat noises.
Yeah.
Sometimes at inopportune times. But it's not like an American film where it's like, I think, Blake, maybe you made the comment as we were watching this to say, if this was an American film, there would be this huge action sequence, with all this like fighting, whatever, like gun battle.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you'd open the bag at the end and say, like, the cat's perfectly fine there.
It'd be clearly a different shot, different location, just establishing to say, the cat's fine, base is covered, let's keep moving.
Right.
The cat is in most of the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a major player as far as representing what he's fighting for.
Like the cat as a character has like the second amount of screen time here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of touching. I mean, the story writes itself a little bit, and we talked about this. We predicted things as they were happening. It's not terribly hard to figure out.
You predicted things that were happening. You do this with every movie we watch. I love you to death, but you do this every time.
All right, so I will also say that I'm the only one who's seen this twice.
Humble brag.
And there are a couple people who predicted things that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to call us out right now, right?
I'm not going to say who said why.
I mean, it's all Blake, so it's okay with me.
No,
I just wanted to yell.
It was more than one time.
There's moments where you're saying, okay, she's not going to be alive when he gets there, or blah 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 blah.
Well,
something's going to happen. Why did he make that choice? That was really dumb. He knows he shouldn't have done that.
We did see some refugees in the middle of the night that were being rescued, like encountered a much larger group. I thought for sure, as a collection of 5 people, I thought for sure they were going to be shot and that we were going to see it. And the camera just cuts away. And we don't know what happens to them. And actually, that level of like ambiguity that we only know what the protagonist knows, that's done so well here.
Yeah, and they adhere to that rule a lot.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it.
I mean, you hear gunfire in the background, but you're like, where's that coming from?
What's happening?
It's more of a place setting, just saying, like, here's what the scene is like. Yeah. Here's what you're dealing with.
And I would say, even if you don't like zombie movies or don't like foreign language films, this one is well worth seeing.
Agreed.
Because the filmmaking prowess is exceptional.
Yeah. Well, you were commenting on the scene setting, like stuff that the director of photography would be in charge of, and how well constructed everything was. Like candle lighting looked accurate.
Yeah, so the use of light by the director of photography in this film is amazing. There are some beautiful golden hour shots using natural light. Yeah. His use of candlelight, which is what you'd have after the electricity stops, is very well done. It feels naturalistic.
Well, and intimate when you see it on screen.
Very intimate.
I want to say there were a few scenes where it was either a green or a blue filter to make it look like it was at night or really low light.
Yes,
of those scenes. I mean, I recognize it because we talked about that before,
right?
In some of the movies that we've seen. Because how do you see in the dark?
Well, the big difference with an American film is it would be stock footage. Whereas here, it felt like they actually filmed with a nice backdrop saying, we need to capture this. Let's get this for this one.
It doesn't look like there were any, other than some of the hospital scenes maybe towards the end, that might have been in a soundstage, but maybe not. You could see the ceiling, though, as Brian says. You can see the ceiling. It's in a real building.
I would say a lot of it was on location. They had those huge, beautiful drone shots from above.
And I was just going to comment, there's some scenes where it uses the natural landscape, the background. You think of like there's an aquatic scene where you see the shoreline in the distance. There's a couple of those where there's like a boat landing.
And what was beautiful about that shot is the clouds matched the topography of the hills behind the estuary.
But I mean, so listener, understand, this is a movie that was a zombie film, but we're talking about like how they use the landscape and the backdrop and the scenery to really accentuate what's going on with the movie.
The focus wasn't the zombies.
I think, I mean, for me,
the focus is the storytelling.
I care about characters. I care about what are those characters' emotions and what are those characters' like developments and growth. Of and this is a movie that's really scratches that itch for me because there's zombies around, but it's about this guy who's grieving his dead wife.
The plot is zombies, but the story is this guy's internal journey.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would love to talk about the zombies for a brief moment.
Sure. Yeah.
What species of zombies are these, Blake?
Yes, what species? Well,
I feel like with David Attenborough, like, you see this is the Iberian zombie who's fast moving and clever, quick on his feet. Here you see one group, they're settling down to creating an encampment down by the river.
So, much.
Yeah, so you were going to say
they're fast zombies, which I don't care for normally, but
they're within 2 weeks of being turned, so they're still fresh.
Yeah. Brian pointed out that it's a lot more subtle on the makeup work. Like Walking Dead, they look super gaunt and drained because it makes sense. It's been like months, years. Yeah.
And like covered in chalk dust.
But I appreciate that they look, I guess, realistic, quote, air quotes around it, for a walking dead body screaming and biting people.
They're also not the main character of this.
Yeah.
And therefore, they aren't using makeup to draw your attention away from the main character.
Right.
Which is this man and a couple people he meets and his personal internal journey, really.
Right.
I also feel like they use a lot more sound design in this movie because there's always the zombies, but this one, I noticed there's a lot more like frantic, kind of scary screaming, almost like a predator making a sound, like a owl screeching to scare you, to grab you with its talons. This felt more like not hoots, screeches, but this is more like audio, scary, fear-basing stuff versus like you see it shuffling in the masses. They still have the masses. That's a classic zombie trope. It's like the whole fear is there's a mass of bodies you can't get around.
You're going to lose by attrition. There's too many of them. You don't have enough bullets.
But with this, there's more like, not the visual of it, but just you hear, rah, 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 and you're like, oh God, where are they? And I thought that was a really well done way to tackle the whole zombie trope.
So do the zombies hear, and do the zombies sense heat? Because if they're dead, they don't put off body heat.
They showed in the movie at one point, he makes a sound, they all turn around to look at him.
Yeah, they seem to respond to sound.
But they're making sounds amongst themselves and around each other. They're banging into stuff.
Perhaps like a pack animal to say, I'm not the prey, but I know where the prey is.
Yeah, maybe it's a combination of those things. Because I know that a lot of the zombie movies and TV shows and stuff that have been around cover this differently. And we know that, obviously not all zombies are created equal. Some of them are better than others.
All zombies are equal before the law.
Yeah.
We
were trying to figure out if this is a bloodborne illness and if you get it in you or on you. Dude gets splattered a lot.
He got splattered multiple times.
A lot.
It seems like it requires a bite.
Right.
But they didn't really lay out the laws of zombies in this in the way some other zombie films do.
Like, I love Zombieland for doing that, but I'm glad this didn't do Zombieland.
Got a double tap.
Well, this adheres to that rule of we only know what the protagonist knows. Yeah, and so there's news, and like they haven't done the full research on this zombie virus. They don't know exactly how it's transmitted.
Well, to reference the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was saying, we don't know what's doing COVID-19. Cover all your bases. And then we found out over time.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. It's aerosol-based. Like, just, mask up. In this movie, it's still pretty early. We don't really get to see.
He owned a boat and has gone diving and has a wetsuit.
Yeah.
And cardboard
gauntlet.
He made himself some armor because he saw someone get bit.
Yeah.
Right. I do want to say, like, the writing on this is so well done and so thoughtful, because I saw something in here that I've never seen in a zombie movie before.
YouTube videos?
And that was he had this. It was like a fish harpoon with just one spear. He does eventually find more, dear listeners. So just know he scrounges, and he's a successful scrounger. But he has this dart that he's been using, and when he hits a zombie and like gets zombie blood on it, he disinfects it. I've never seen, like, you think of like swords in zombie movies.
Axes get used a lot.
Or anything.
Cricket bats in Shaun of the Dead.
This is the first time I've seen somebody like disinfecting their weapon, their dart from zombie blood, so that they can handle it safely.
Which, seeing it now, makes so much sense in hindsight. Now I'm thinking, well, oh my God, what are they all doing?
Why wouldn't they? Yeah.
Right.
I feel like it feels like something from the Zombie Survival Guide by Max Brooks, like the actual book, not the movie, for Lord's sake, but the book.
I bring this up though, like this is kind of a signal, or like it's one way that this is a really thoughtful exploration of like what would a zombie apocalypse really look like.
Do we think he has seen zombie films or has exposure to them or read about them?
Well, we saw
he does some really fast action on building stuff.
He doesn't do that thing where they're like, "Oh boy, what do I do? Did you get bit? What do we do if you get bit?"
Yeah,
like that thing that drives me crazy in every zombie
We
movie.
saw his giant TV in his apartment. We know he watches stuff.
Yeah. So I think I would guess that he probably has some exposure to zombie lore and understands, because so he's sitting there watching YouTube how to safeguard your home from this by putting from burglars and put up spikes and stop them from climbing over. And it's like, but then you leave the house. It's like, go through all that effort.
Well, he went through. He raided the neighborhood and got what he could, and it was like, I gotta go.
Yeah, you have to remember, like the span of this was like the story I think takes place maybe over 2 months. And, for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, he's in his house hanging out with his cat by himself. There's not a lot of story, and the movie really passes through that. I think there's actually subtitles that say, 2 weeks later.
It appropriately passes the span of downtime to let you know time has passed.
Right.
Right.
And there's a brief montage, which is briefer than most American films, but it shows you that he's preparing to bunker up and stay in his house. The same way we hoarded toilet paper and juice in COVID-19.
And we saw a couple scenes of that in a supermarket.
I never installed spikes on my fence, or
I did. That's why I'm not getting my deposit back.
Yeah.
Brian doesn't watch YouTube enough.
Clearly.
Brian watches the YouTube where it's like for kids.
Can we talk a moment about the pacing of this film?
I'd love to.
What did you guys think about how it was structured that way?
I loved it. I said it earlier. There was not a wasted frame of film. Like everything made sense. Everything that you were shown was pertinent to the story. I think it was exactly right. Even if he spent time bunkering and then going, well, now I have to venture out.
Yeah.
It's still just,
I would
that's just
also say that there were quiet, slow moments, but they were rich and full and meaningful.
Right.
Talking to grandma.
It wasn't all tension and action, which you would see in an American film.
Not a bunch of quips.
Well, also fewer guns than you would see in an American movie. Like a lot of American movies, like the solution would be go to the armory and then or go to your basement and get your gun locker.
Find your red stater neighbor and get their hoard.
Yeah, get their hoard because your red stater neighbor made a stupid mistake and they're dead now, so you can take all their stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say I think the tension was higher here because he didn't have access to firearms. He had to find other solutions and use what he had on hand, including I did spoil a little earlier.
Running away a lot.
There was a fish harpoon that's involved, but
he had to go stealth mode versus just gun him down.
Right,
and I think that really helped with it. Just the pacing, also the running to other humans.
Right, and some humans are good. Some
that was the big
humans
appeal
are
of Walking Dead.
Some are not so friendly.
Big appeal of Walking Dead was it's not the dead we have to worry about; it's the other people.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question.
42.
Pose away.
Based on a Spanish zombie film versus an American film, I thought thematically family and human connections were very important in this film.
Yes.
Whereas Walking Dead, it's more about the individual and how does the individual survive. So individual versus community, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think I'd agree with that. Even with the George Romero films, it's a group of 2 to 3 people at most. just kind of dealing with.
And sometimes they're random. They don't know each other.
It's a struggle of solitude against like the undead hordes.
Yeah.
Well, Shaun of the Dead, he's trying to save his ex-girlfriend, not his mom.
Oh no,
not
he doesn't get his mom.
brother,
He gets his mom.
sister.
He's dragging his friends around.
He gets his mom.
Okay, he does
but
get his
stepdad
mom.
dies.
His stepdad, but the girlfriend is the point of focus in that.
Yeah,
that effort.
but it's to his own benefit. If I save her, she'll love me again.
Right. Here, there's all these really touching video calls with a sibling. And then also too, real drama of like when he loses connection for like 2 weeks and then finally gets all of the video
The stored up
messages. That he hadn't been able to access. And then
of his sister and nephew,
of the sibling, and you see like, you know, in real time, kind of like what's his journey of catching up and then seeing the progression of everything he had missed with his sibling. So we've been speaking here for about 21 minutes, and I think we've said like 95% positive things about this movie. Was there anything you guys didn't like?
I would say that it's some of the decisions he made were, hey, I didn't know that they were attracted by sound, so let me ride this super loud motorbike around. There were zombies in the neighborhood, and then there weren't. So where did they go? Are they going to wander off
to hell,
food?
Dan?
Are they going to? So that's the question. I mean, there's
They went to hell. They're
from a consistency standpoint on like you're presenting them in an environment and then now they're not there without any explanation. That to me is like, okay, there's no food because they already killed everything, right? And you didn't see houses being broken into, but you saw.
Well, there was one encounter with another burglar, I think.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, like suspension of disbelief of there were zombies, and now
I guess I've been spoiled by all the American films and the American Hollywood take where it's like they're just
where
gonna
you just can't
everything.
get away from zombies.
They're everywhere.
No matter how many you kill, no
There's
area
just too
is
many.
ever cleared.
there are like islands of safety here, I think, that people find. Like you do find some survivors in these small pockets.
Unless
here
you're
and
already
there.
infected and then once you die, you turn.
Well,
That's just the whole premise of The Walking Dead. There, I just ruined it. Dan ruined it.
That's
for
a million-year-old comic book.
Yeah, no, I mean that comes out in like the second season or the third.
So
season. Yeah,
Dan wants more zombies all the time in this movie.
Yes, I mean because that's what it's about, right? Not
I
storytelling.
like
zombies.
I like the storytelling aspects of it. I like that we see this character who's got this emotional journey, and also this precious talisman of a lost relationship that he's trying to protect in really difficult circumstances.
So prior to us watching this, we were flipping through some of the other movies that I have that are zombie related that are fairly new, and there's like a Korean one and a Chinese one, and I want to say there was another one that was not American. I think it was like Mexican, like Chulo the Zombie or something like that. It takes place in LA or something.
Julio the Zombie.
And it's like all of them had a lot of comedy associated with them. And like the Korean one had like a zombie shark that came after people. So I mean, it was just like how ridiculous. And the whole premise of it.
Shark, much.
Zombie shark.
The premise was, hey, I don't have to go to work now because his work was so weighing him down from his life.
Well, that's kind of Korean culture.
And so now he can live his life and he makes a bucket list. It's called like
he was
the
liberated.
100 things to do
Before I turn.
That's like the name of the film. It looks funny.
I want to watch that. I mean, not that this movie was not worth it.
So storytelling wise, I think using the guise of zombies, like the platform that zombies present and people are familiar with, because it's been so ingrained into the culture, pop culture, and people know what they are. You can say the word zombie and they know what that is.
Hey, Dan, we don't say the Z word here.
If I can pivot a little bit and talk about, like, this was a Spanish film.
Yes.
The only other Spanish films I really know well are like Pedro Almodovar, like All About My Mother, and now I can't think of the other titles. But he did like, a dozen of them through kind of the 90s and early. Maybe this is a question mostly for Brian, and sorry to put you on the spot, but
Spotlight sound.
what do we know about like the Spanish cinema industry? Like I know that there's a local market for Spanish language movies, and I know that there's some international success and recognition. Almodovar being only one of many Spanish directors and movie makers, but how does this sit in, like, I don't know if any movies from Spain in like the last 10 years, because I honestly haven't been paying too much attention.
I mean, we did watch The Man Who Killed
La Mancha?
No, yeah,
the man who killed Don Quixote.
Don Quixote, and that took place in Spain.
that took place in Spain, but it was a American-funded film, I believe.
And Adam Driver was the main character.
Yeah.
So I'm asking about Spanish
I don't think I was here for that
filmmaking,
one.
Dan.
So-
Spanish filmmaking.
Film de España.
I regret I can't answer that question.
Okay.
You as a white man can't? Weird.
I know that they have a local industry. It's not big. I know that there are some Americans who couldn't get funding from Hollywood who have gone to Spain to make their films there.
Right.
Orson Welles, in particular.
Oh.
He made a couple of his films after he kind of got on the Hollywood blacklist after being so difficult to work with, kind of in his middle period before he became the fat spokesman for Paul Masson Wines.
The French.
He made a couple of really amazing films in Spain.
I'd buy that.
But he's not a Spanish director, but clearly there was a local...
There's a market for it.
Yeah, there was clearly local talent in Spain to make films.
So the internet says that 86 to 80, 1968 to 1980 was the golden age of Spanish B horror movies.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So during like the Franco years. Is
Yeah.
Like by the way, Talk to Her was the other Almodovar movie. That 2002 brilliant movie. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
So there was, at the end of the dictatorship in the 70s, there was some changes that happened and they were free to make more films about different and interesting things. But the industry itself is fairly small. It's only 35 to 50 million annual. So it's fairly small there within the country.
It's a small industry.
For the films that they make internally, it's hard because everything comes from Hollywood or comes from India. Bollywood or Hollywood is where everything comes from.
Right. Why would you spend a lot of money when you can import something that reaches your local audience?
Yeah. And it's just a subbing or a dubbing. It's easy. So
and there's some exceptions to the rule here, because like Water for Chocolate, 1992, that was Google says it's a Spanish movie, and also I'm sure we've all seen Pan's Labyrinth.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Pan's Labyrinth is incredible.
Yeah, right. Guillermo del Toro.
God, he's so good.
Spanish,
which is interesting because
I feel terrible that I keep forgetting that.
Those don't show up on the internal domestic gross in Spain itself.
Well, I'm curious.
Those are Spanish films that are being distributed through Hollywood, though. So domestically,
so that guy with the eyes on the hands, though. Ooh, what a great movie!
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean it's just interesting. I mean, so you have somebody who knows what the heck they're doing, directing.
Oh yeah,
beautiful screen. I mean, the writing was really well done. It's believable. You have a lot of compassion and empathy for this character who went through a huge loss. He's got a lot of internal grief. He feels like he's responsible because he started the argument that caused her to stop, and that's when the accident
led to the accident. I mean, this was based on a book originally, and I think that might lead more to like having that protagonist and like grief journey.
I would say as a filmmaker, the photography is phenomenal.
Right.
You mentioned the sound design, or Blake mentioned the sound design. The editing I mentioned while we were watching, there are several times when they cut early because you don't need to know what happens.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say the editing is very terse, but very precise and well done. The flashbacks are kind of seamless. There are no gimmicks to tell you flash back, but you're there.
Yeah. This movie doesn't beat you over the head with the point saying like, here's what the point is. You see what you see, and they trust the viewer to go, oh, I understand what's happening.
I kind of find an analogy almost with Hemingway of like saying more with less,
right?
Like you don't have to fully show a scene where there's a violent confrontation. You can show the first part of that, how it goes, and then cut, and then the viewer just kind of knows.
They'll see where the protagonist or whoever in the following shot, where they are just physically, emotionally, and go, oh, okay, I see what happened.
There can be some films, I think, that will leave some things unsaid or kind of imply that there was violence, and I think that can be used to heighten the tension in some ways.
Absolutely agree.
This movie is along those lines. I give it a very thorough recommendation.
So
we also had some beer.
We did have some beer, but I just want to touch back on the Spanish cinema just for 2 seconds because
yes.
I might have
because
misspoke
I
a
asked
little
that
bit.
question. I'll allow it.
Yeah,
That's a good attempt, Brian.
the Spanish
Aaron.
film industry.
Thanks, Brian Blake.
based on this website that it's the internet. It's a site from Spain. Grew 30% in 2023. So Netflix co-productions. It's not them making them. It's companies coming in and say, "Hey, we want to film here. You give us the story. You give us the actors. You give us what we need, and we're going to provide you with an amazing
Money.
we're
Is
gonna
that
give you the
similar
money
to? Is that
do it."
similar how we saw a lot more Korean films on Netflix
Yeah.
a few years ago?
Yeah, it just exploded because they're like, "Oh, you guys have really good story writers and good directors and good
And we need content.
cinematography."
You've got unplumbed talent, and therefore it's cheap.
Well, I was going to say
Correct.
that was as much discovery as anything else because you remember what was it? The Parasite.
Yeah.
The Korean film that kind of broke open.
I think we did that for the podcast.
we did an episode with Parasite.
Yeah.
Right. And then there was the Netflix
Squid Game.
Yep. But like Korea has had a film industry, locally for, a couple of decades.
And then Detective K.
Well, more local
Classic film series.
And Space Sweepers, which we did Soju with.
Yes. So, listener,
Sweepers
if you
is
have
so
not
good.
seen Space Sweepers, Detective K, or Apocalypsis Z, do yourself a favor. I'd recommend all of those.
Highly recommend.
But they're
Yeah.
probably all on Netflix.
But
too.
have some tasty beverages.
Yes.
It don't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. So I think this is the time on the podcast that we're going to switch over and talk about beer.
Yeah, Aaron,
They
shut up. We're
do.
trying to talk about beer.
Thanks, Blake.
Thanks
They,
for the
they drink
transition.
wine. They drink whiskey in this beer. They drink. I think
Movie?
there
In this
was
movie.
Oh wait, what did I say?
He said whiskey in this beer, which I'm not opposed to. I put a little shot in my pub beer.
I don't
Yum,
think
yum,
they
yum.
drink. I don't
Okay.
think there's any beer in this film.
I've had two
there's
beers.
Whiskey,
I'm done. I guess.
There's
Hey,
whiskey and some wine. Definitely when he
Yeah.
goes around scavenging.
And
he's-
when he's
crackers.
romancing his old lady
he's
neighbor.
lamenting his super sad.
Yeah.
All right. So as we've discussed, we watched this really amazing Spanish film called Apocalypsis.
Z.
Z. The beginning of the end. So Apocalypsis Z. El principio del fin.
Principal Defense and Delphin, and it ends on a cliffhanger that
It does.
highly suggests a follow up that I am interested in watching.
I'd watch it. I would
Don't come
absolutely
to the
watch that.
Canaries. Don't come to the Canaries. That's all I'm going to say.
Spoilers, man. Spoilers.
Yeah,
I
that's a spoiler. David.
Little spoiler for the beers. I liked both of them, but what do we have?
Yeah. So we, as mentioned earlier, I was down at Beer Mongers, which is in Southeast Portland.
Big fan of
11.
Beer Mongers.
They local hangout. Check them out. They always have a lot of rotating stock. Good stuff on draft. Real local vibe going on there. Every
Yeah.
time I've been in there is always.
Not going to see any tourists in there. It's all
No.
people who live in the area.
And there are
What's up?
food carts nearby and restaurants nearby, but you will find that with the selection that they have, you can always ask questions and say, "Hey, what's your new stuff?" And the people that work there,
And they'll go, "I don't know."
No, they're super knowledgeable, and they'll be like, "This one, this one, and this one."
Beer
has alcohol.
I don't drink beer.
Yeah,
Harpoon.
So I was grabbing a bunch of the stuff that they had, including the two beers that we had. First one was from Boneyard Brewing, which I believe we've had before, and Boneyard is out of Bend, Oregon.
Yeah, we had Boneyard for a few of them, I think.
So this is Holy Bones West Coast IPA.
Great can art. We'll post it to the Instagram.
So
it's so fun.
I will say that. So this is 6.66% ABV and 66 IBU for whatever reason, and it uses Simcoe, Citra, and Chinook, and then it's using what most companies have now switched to with their IPAs. There's some 2-row in there as the base malt, but then they're using Pilsner and white wheat or red wheat. So not flattened out wheat, but wheat that's still in the kernel format. And what that does is give you more mouthfeel. It's cheaper, it's easier to manage, and allows the hops to express a little bit more easily in flavor wise. And there's not a lot of body. So cold IPA, again, or West Coast IPA, use that kind of malt bill. So really common. So you're going to have like, hey, this is an overhop Pilsner. It's basically like a Pilsner recipe for the malt, and then the hops are going to be all IPA based.
so, but the shape matters in the taste when you cook it.
Yeah, well, if it's flaked like oatmeal,
Okay.
if you have Cheerios versus oatmeal,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's rolled
cool,
oats
cool. That makes
versus
sense.
Presto
Mhm.
that's flattened out and not baked as much, so it's not going to be
Yeah, that tracks.
So you're going to still get some of that mouthfeel character from the wheat without it being pressed out. You don't add as much complexity to the malt bill. You're just adding mouthfeel.
Are there other factors that can affect mouthfeel on a beer generally, or just?
Yeah, I mean, if you add stuff like lactose or something that will cause tongue coating, the amount of hopping, dry hopping, or wet hopping, or can also cause the alpha acidities to be so high that it causes your tongue to be like, it doesn't.
It kind of dries out a little bit.
Well, I know with like whiskeys and with wine, the longer you age something, like there's still evaporation that happens very slowly, and that will concentrate what's left and intensify. Like for whiskey, they call it the angel's share. That you fill up the barrel all the way. Yeah. And then, when you open it up after it's aged, there's less of it that's just disappeared magically because it's not the brewmaster that's drinking it.
It's the gremlins.
It's the angel,
it's
right?
The angel.
But so with beer, like Dan, does the character change the longer you age?
Oh yeah,
beer?
of course.
Like,
yeah.
It must with oak.
If you're going to barrel age it, of course it will. The hop profile is going to drop out because those hot molecules that have attached to what flavor molecules are floating around start to dissipate, start breaking down.
They disintegrate over time.
They release. They no longer
will that
on.
lessen the aromatics also?
Yes. So we talked recently about fresh hopping and be careful around fresh hop beers. If it's on draft a month after fresh hop season, it's probably gone bad. Now that's not always the case.
But that one night we were out, I heard about it a lot.
But that's typically the case. You'll find places that know how to handle and take care of their beer, and it's kept cold and it's on pressure the whole time. You don't have to worry about it being oxidized because they clean their lines and they do a good job. Those can stand for a month or two beyond what you would normally have a fresh hop beer available. This I don't think is fresh hopped. I think this might be dry hopped with Citra because it has that characteristic. But there is some marketing copy if you'd like to read it. But again, as I mentioned to the guys, this was a CDA, and just this last month, they changed the recipe to being a West Coast IPA and not a Cascadian Dark Ale or Black IPA, which we drink next.
Well, so how would you define a Black IPA?
Yeah,
like,
Dan.
what are the characteristics that would differentiate it?
The color is black.
That's it.
That's it.
It's only a skin deep definition.
It's a visual thing.
I'm disappointed by this.
I love it when I'm expecting a big long answer and he just goes, "It's this." Hell yeah, brother.
Red IPA is red.
Is it a judgeable category of its own?
Yes.
Hulks.
It is.
Black IPA is in its own subcategory, specialty
This
subcategory.
racist.
They were called Cascadian Dark Ales before they called them Black IPAs, but they have Red IPA, and I don't know any Indians getting mad, so Black IPAs. I mean, it's black.
Well, they call natives,
Dan.
Dan. Jesus.
Yeah. So this is not that. This is West
not
Coast.
that.
This is not that.
This had a golden color to it. No.
Yes, this is a regular IPA.
Yeah, it was not
that
black.
has some really interesting can art and some marketing copy. Aaron, we keep cutting you off.
Distracted by giving a marketing copy.
The marketing copy is a little hard to read. Forgive me here. So, judgment was made, and people have chosen. The hop have risen, and dark malt has laid to rest. Holy Bones, is that CDA?
Yes, Cascadian Dark Ale.
Oh, okay. I was thinking like CB. CDA has been resurrected as Holy Bones
WCIPA.
West Coast IPA. Yeah. I'm not up on all these acronyms here. The marketing copy is hard to read. We should just edit this out.
No. Honoring the original spirit while embracing a brighter, hoppier visage, its flavor profile unfolds like a liquid sermon with resonant notes of citrus, resinous pine, and a hint of tropical fruit. All coming together in sacred harmony. And India Pale Ale, 1 pint, parentheses, 16 fluid point ounces, unparentheses.
Yeah, so this is, again,
the
sort of the new trend for West Coast, or what's called West Coast IPA. So it's going to have a lighter mouthfeel. It's going to allow the hops to express a little bit more.
It was easy to drink.
Super easy to drink. It did have a little bit of acidity to it. I mean, it's got 66 IBU, so there is a little bite to it. It's a little bit more than what Brian is used to.
Yeah, it's a little bitter. I really enjoyed the aromatics, though.
Yeah. It smelled like fresh hop beer.
My nose is stopped up, so I didn't catch the aromatics, but I really enjoyed the flavor. I think I like stuff with a little bit of acid bite. I mean, I love pickles. I love anything brined. So this is right up my alley of like, ooh, perfect beer. And I think it matched I feel like it would have matched the back half of the movie better.
Yeah, I think I got
Still-
them backwards. But
Yeah,
that's
I
okay.
would have flipped the
But it still matched the movie. This would also match any kind of like summer blockbuster, I think.
Yeah,
It was
Like just-
easy drinking, easy
Yeah,
watching.
yeah.
I wasn't getting a lot of resin pine kind of tones with it.
Same.
though. Like,
it's a little those, like I said. So they probably did those as the initial. The Simcoe and the Chinook they did are higher alpha acidity hops and aren't going to impart a lot of flavor. So anything above 8% alpha or 8 alpha acidity on the scale up to 20, which you can taste. Anything anything up to 8 or 10, you're going to taste. Anything above that is just bitterness at that point. You
It's like
may get a
4K
little
televisions.
flavor.
You can't see the difference,
Yeah.
but it says it's nicer.
It's there. So
it's kind of like when you get over 40, your bitterness doesn't make any difference.
So Citra,
just a curmudgeon.
Citra is not that big of an alpha acidity hop, so they probably use that. And Citra is going to have more of that citrus vibe and more. It's going to have some dry sharpness to it.
Grapefruit.
And the Simcoe and Chinook, I mean, those are classic.
Yeah.
They're classic West Coast hops.
Right.
You're not going to see those used in IPAs in the Midwest or East Coast because they're not common out there.
I never saw them until I moved out here. I just assumed, well, these are the hops that exist before I came out here and realized,
and
it's a bunch of hops.
Yeah, they grow hops out there. They just don't have as much. And what they have is a completely different strain and varietal than what we have out here. So,
Well, one of the first things that I learned upon moving to Portland is that the river valley where the city is situated, it has like the perfect growing conditions for hops. And that's why, dear listener, if you're not a local to Portland, part of why there's such a strong local beer scene here is the two major ingredients. Hops, it grows exceptionally well in this area.
and grain.
But then also, I was going to say water.
We have amazing water.
We have amazing water that comes from the Cascade Mountains. It's all partitioned and separated. And that's not common in the United States. There's a lot of areas that use well water that will pull up some mineral content from the aquifer.
Correct.
And here, it's all like rainwater and elk pee commingled together, coming down.
Give me a big steaming cup of elk piss.
And it makes the best beer.
Evaporating glaciers.
That's right. That's right.
Now I'm
So-
sad and drunk.
A really, really interesting, good beer. Check it out if you can find it. So again, Boneyard. I know they have multiple locations there in Bend, but you can find them distributed around Portland.
They're all over the place.
They've been around for a while. You
Shoot,
can find
7-Eleven
them-
and Plaid Pantry carry Boneyard.
Yeah, and Fred Meyer and all the big grocery stores around here do. You might even get them all the way up into like middle or higher up in Washington State. And by the way, Washington State produces more hops than Oregon. But you didn't know that.
Bum, bum.
Local rivalry.
Shock. Yeah. It's not that they have more breweries. It's just there's converted more farmland from wheat over to doing hops.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Versus
We
converting.
grow hops in our backyard.
Yeah.
Just because.
Just
I mean,
because.
is it
Well, Tony
home-
makes tea out of it.
She makes tea out of it.
Yeah.
Helps her sleep.
Nice.
Yeah, no, there's homebrewers that will do that too here. Because
Yeah.
they're just,
Hop water.
Well, it's easy. I mean, you just put the vine in the ground every year. It grows bigger.
right.
And now there are ways of saying you only want to. There's a male and a female hop cone.
And when they
you
love
keep
each
the
other
branches.
very much.
So if you're just planting stuff, you don't know if it's the male or the female unless you know what those rhizomes are when you were given them. And it's really hard to know. So the female rhizomes tend to be the ones that get used more than the male ones, I believe. But I could be wrong.
They
I'm just-
have
I'm
bigger
just guessing.
flowers.
They do. They taste better. So the second beer that we had was from.
I think this was the
ColdFire
agreed
Brewing?
upon favorite.
Yes, it was really
Right.
good. So
No.
ColdFire is out of Eugene. I've been there not very long ago. They have a couple locations in town. So Citra Solstice Black IPA. So the reason they're calling it Citra Solstice is probably Citra was the primary hop that they used, and it goes really well with Black IPA because myself as a home brewer who's made Black IPA but using rye also focused on using Citra as the primary bittering agent.
Well, this looked like a dark beer. It had the appearance of
black.
kind of you're right. And so to call this a black IPA at least makes sense to me. The first one felt like it was a marketing play. Like it wasn't, there wasn't anything about that IPA that wasn't,
Yeah,
That wasn't typical.
for
It was pretty
both
standard.
being black IPAs, they were very different beers.
Yes.
Well, the first one wasn't a black IPA.
Oh,
it
it
is a
wasn't?
West
Okay.
Coast. It was
It
originally
used to be a
started-
black
used to
IPA.
be.
Okay.
and then they changed.
They
it.
recharacterized
Yeah.
it because it wasn't really a black.
So that's the
IPA.
nice thing.
From the first movie to the sequel, they decided to upgrade it.
Well, did they
Change
change the
it,
recipe also?
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
they had to change the hops and the malts because not necessarily. You can just use different malts and keep the same hop profile and hope it turns out the same. But the hops and the malts
Okay.
interact differently based on.
But let's pivot back to talk about ColdFire. This was a nice beer.
I have a quick question, Dan, about the
Mm-hmm.
can. It says 3 seasonal release fall. Is this something they release like each season through a year?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like the same beer, but
Slightly different.
winter,
different
spring, summer, fall.
Different recipes, probably changes. Just
That's
like
cool.
this Boneyard used to be a CDA and it's now just a regular West Coast IPA.
Nice.
So you take the same beer, you change the recipe, but you've already got all the damn marketing out there for that beer.
Right.
Oh, it changed.
costs money,
That's okay. Nobody cares. It is
Well,
what
I
it
care.
is. I mean, some people might, but
Yeah,
most people
Aaron, we
don't.
know.
This is the copy on this one is dark and mysterious. The citrus solstice is beguilingly smooth, yet bright with flavor and intense aromatics.
I don't see this.
Hops and malt together in unison, reaching the
It's-
level of
Dan's reading from his
collaboration
laptop.
that makes this beer a truly unique expression of IPA. No, that's off their website.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry to have interrupted. I was just like, this isn't on the can.
No, it's not. There is some copy on the can, but it's really small and hard to read.
ColdFire can, 16 ounces.
The dark
sold
side of the bay,
Is there
full of
a-
bright citrus hope.
on the other side of the
Oh,
can.
day. Dang it.
Yeah, there's one light here and there's a glare on the can.
And
when
I'm
I
wearing
look
my
at it,
glasses, so
I
I'm
can't-
fine.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the born on date on the bottom of this can, and it says,
Of the Boneyard?
yeah,
There's not one on my ColdFire can.
There's a
10/14.
9/18. It was born on
Oh.
September the
9/18.
18th.
this was 10. So the Boneyard was even fresher.
Was fresher,
10/14.
Ooh.
But
Nice.
they were both fresh. Like there was nothing wrong with either. of
But
these.
just on a calendar, it's a month's worth fresher shrug.
So even having it be darker in color, IPA again, as we've discovered, it doesn't matter. It has 66 IBU, the same amount as the other one. No bitter profile at all.
Wow.
No,
It was smooth.
I would say it's kind of like drinking a liquid bran muffin.
Kind of.
I'd agree with that. It was a good, full-bodied, sweeter flavor than the other one.
With not a lot of bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not as much aromatics, I would say.
a little bit, more.
I'll
subtle.
take your word on it. Again, stopped up nose, but
Yeah.
that sounds right.
Any other thoughts on? I think if we were to have known ahead of time,
I think the
not having had
the-
either of these
the
beers,
ColdFire for the intro of the film would have worked a little better,
Yeah.
Right.
And then having
Because he was
the-
kind of at home in a safe zone.
and this beer is a little more cozy, a little
more
softer.
cozy at home.
yes,
And then he ventures
When-
into the greater world.
When we head towards the climax of the film, working on the Holy Bones West Coast IPA to kind of go with the action and it was also a lot of daylight action, which I appreciate. That's what makes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre such a great horror movie. It's a daytime horror film.
So we had, I think, two kind of balanced, well executed IPAs here to go along with the movie. I liked these beers. I'm not really a hophead. IPAs aren't
Right.
necessarily my favorite. I was just going to ask you guys, kind of maybe last question. What would you drink with this movie? Now, knowing what the movie is, what would you choose to pair with it that would match our
I
hero's
would
journey?
find a nice porter or a nice stout,
I was gonna say a porter as well.
something that's not super heavy. You know, not
something
super
you
high alcohol.
something you
that
sip.
can
You
just sip.
purposely sip carefully,
Yeah.
tasting throughout the glass versus actually drinking the beer.
Uh-huh.
This is a lengthier movie than we expected, but again, no wasted scenes, just
Yeah. It was like hour 58, but
something like that.
yeah, there are credits at the end, but not at the beginning, which I thought was kind of interesting. And another one of those, just jump right into it.
That might be more of an American thing where, like, I know for Chris Nolan films, you have to have like credits at the beginning and end, but to get around it, he put lead stars credits twice at the back end. It was a whole thing. But I'd agree with Dan as far as the question Aaron posed. Like, I'd say porter, maybe like a heavy stout, something to serve as a meal, quote unquote, as you're watching the film.
As
this
you
might
see the zombies eating people.
This might be a heresy here, but I actually think like a Spanish sherry.
Ooh,
I mean, this is moving
not
the
a
beer.
bad call. Not a bad call.
So some port.
That's Portuguese, but hey, we're not going to differentiate. here.
we're not going to be racist here.
Yeah, but
I like that. Brian, do you have any thoughts on this? Both
thought-
Aaron's pick and what you want to try.
Yeah, I don't know about Aaron's pick. I really like the ColdFire beer, our second choice. It went very well with the film. So
So another similar black IPA.
A similar one. Yeah, like a tasty, not bitter, cozy beer.
Otherwise
I
known
would
as a
say.
porter or a stout.
Well, I would say sometimes those get a little heavy.
They can be, yeah.
You're not wrong.
And this, in some places, was kind of a poetic film.
Yeah.
It wasn't a grand, epic, big film.
Not some dense with lore
Yeah.
But,
project we're dealing with.
When we meet the Russians, and this really isn't a spoiler, but when we meet the Russians, I think a stout would really be appropriate.
Aaron's referring to when
okay.
we're going to go meet some Russian guys after this podcast.
That's right.
It's
We're
going to be a
borscht.
rough night, folks.
We're gonna go shoot some vodka somewhere.
But no, I think you're right, Aaron. Like that scene does call for something
Heavier.
maybe a shot of something or like a
Spanish
taster.
there
Hey,
you go.
someone else mentioned Spanish sherry. Was it Dan?
Yeah, I think it was.
All right. Thanks for listening and hanging out.
Oh, you're
everybody.
welcome.
We've had a really fun time with this film and really enjoyed these beers. Check them out if you can. Again,
Absolutely.
Boneyard. This is the Holy Bones West Coast IPA, and the other one is the ColdFire Citra.
Black IPA.
It is Citra Solstice Black IPA. Yeah. It's the third seasonal of this brand. Check them out. Good stuff. And I want to say check this film out. Not necessarily kid appropriate. Teenager appropriate, maybe.
Right.
There's no nudity.
Teens be
There's
fine with it, yeah.
There's not really that much foul language, but it's
No
subtitled.
language, not a lot of gore.
Not a lot of gore. I mean,
Again,
there's some
pretty
biting
subtle.
of necks, but that's it, and that's just a little splat.
A couple
Yeah,
gunshots.
Some gunfire, yeah.
So pretty tame and mild compared to
This-
American standards.
Probably doesn't even reach PG-13, I don't think.
Really,
Yeah.
I would say
I
it
can
would.
see
but
that.
I don't know. It seems pretty like. You could watch
pretty
this on cable
tame.
TV. You could watch this
Yeah,
on cable
sure.
TV
Yeah.
on TNT unedited.
I don't
straight up.
think this would be rated G, but it's like certainly not rated R. We'll say it that way.
Yeah.
Like,
All right.
So yeah, you could. This is teenager appropriate if they're interested in the genre.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a good way of introducing them to storytelling that's not just about the
Yeah.
gore.
I'd give them.
But-
I'd give
but
them like Night of the Living Dead, something else, Shaun of the Dead, something else, and then this.
Work
get a
up
nice
to it.
rounded-
I think
yeah,
this
like a
is
28 days
more
later, maybe.
interesting for adults. There's some deeper issues
Yeah.
that you can kind of chew on with your brain.
Most of
Loss,
us have dealt with
grief,
loss,
A bit more,
loss and grief,
more
Cats.
grief coverage, yeah.
and cats, evil
Bad
cats.
cats.
I was looking up cat memes as we were watching this. I'm like, that cat is gonna swipe at
You
somebody.
do that for every movie, though.
or push something off, or it didn't, but I was expecting it to.
Oh, it did. It just wasn't in any of the scenes.
It left its
They
food
cut that
on-
footage. It was ruined.
It left its food on the floor because when he goes down there to like
I do gotta
put
say,
more food in,
how do you get a cat to act this well? This cat was believable. This cat carried its
I'm
character.
gonna stand by this.
This
They said
cat-
that cat was 4 years old. That cat was way older than 4 years
Yeah,
old.
right. No,
It was
but
moving.
whoever the cat trainer is on this movie, they
Did
are
a
like
good
the
job.
lots of
expert.
catnip,
Yeah.
lots
Yes.
of catnip.
Man.
Get it high, it's just gonna sit there and be like meow.
Or it's just an old cat.
Well, but it
Still.
also it moved when it needed to move, and it went where it needed to go.
Fun fact about dogs: a lot of them have to have their tails CGI'd because even though they're being scary, their
They
tails just
wag.
keep wagging because they're so stoked. Like, I'm helping.
Yeah. Anyway, so as always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this recording are those of the hosts, and we want to thank you again for hanging out and listening. Check out this great film. Check out some good beers, and thanks for listening and hanging out.
All right, listener, thank you for joining us. I just want to say, if you find yourself in a zombie apocalypse, YouTube will save you. It will give you videos on how to protect yourself and your home. YouTube.
This is Blake. So the thing about the dogs, the same thing is true for Tom Cruise. You have to CGI out his tail wagging.
This is Brian signing off. If you get a chance, please watch this film. Express yourself through foreign language films.
Yes.
Steal your neighbor's Netflix password.
Yes.
Don't pay Netflix.
All right. Take care, everyone.